It is the Eastern Conference Finals Pacers game day of a Tuesday as the Pacers and Celtics set to begin their 7-game series. Starting in the Garden, the TD Garden. Got to make that shift, as you know, from East Coast MSG to the TD Garden in Boston. Pacers hoping for the same result either way with a win to be had at some point in the Garden, assuming they can keep their home record afloat. Hi again, everybody. Jimmy Cook coming to you for Query and Company. Eddie Garrison behind the ones and twos. Jake Query will join us a little bit later in the program. Jake is very busy in the month of May. I believe Eddie is the rookie luncheon today, if I am correct there.
It would be the fastest rookie luncheon. That is correct. So he's getting to chat with Kyle Larson today.
There you go.
After he milked the cow.
Wow.
He decided to not glove up.
Okay.
He did it raw with his hands.
All right, then.
And milked the cow. And I believe the cow's name was Cream, ironically enough.
There you go. So a full day's worth of stories there, no doubt, that Jake will pick up on when he joins us. But the top of all of those stories, of course, is the Pacers and the Celtics getting underway a little bit later this evening. Concurrently with that, or not concurrently, but in terms of concurrently on the day, is Colts OTAs getting underway as well. A lot to get into. Stephen Holder will join us in the 2 o'clock hour, as he will take us through 1 o'clock hour, I beg your pardon, as he will take us through all of the ongoings of initial operations over there for Colts OTAs, and we'll continue to track that as well throughout the week. General Manager of the Indiana Fever, Dunn, will join us at 1:30. Another close one for the Fever last night, though still looking to break through. Evan Sidery will join us at the bottom of this hour, talking all things NBA playoffs, and Scott Agnes will give us a Pacers preview at the top of the 2 o'clock hour. But we start first with Celtics Pacers. For Indiana, as you know, to this point, their first conference finals appearance in a decade since they were dispatched by the Miami Heat back in 2014. And in terms of storylines and looking at the opposition, much like there was in that series, you are not lost for star power across the aisle when you look at these Boston Celtics. Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown most notably, but there's star pieces, albeit in different stages of their careers, all around this roster. Derek White and Drew Holiday, a part of all defensive teams this season. Drew Holiday in his own right, a former All-Star. Al Horford, who has picked up a lot of the brunt work in the minutes distribution with Kristaps Porzingis being out. He is projected, per Adrian Wojnarowski, to be out for the first 2 games at least of this series, and then we'll see where things go from here. When you look at a matchup like this, once a postseason draw occurs and you realize who you're playing, the most natural thing that occurs is to look how things went for the Pacers in the regular season series. And strangely enough, because of how much change has happened with the Pacers, and we've documented this a couple times prior to the Milwaukee series and as well going into the series against New York, because of all the changes the Pacers experienced when they made that real all-in push, or at least one of their all-in push moves for Pascal Siakam, there was not a ton of matchup data to compare between the Boston Celtics and the Indiana Pacers. Boston won the regular season 3-2, but for Indiana's 2 wins in that column, names that are not available tonight for a number of different reasons, Buddy Hield and Bruce Brown due to trades, and Benedict Mathurin due to injury, averaged about 49 points in those 2 wins and contributed 19 of 40 from beyond the arc. Most of those triples, of course, from Buddy Hield, but we've seen different areas of this Pacers roster players pick up the slack, whether it's guys like Obi Toppin, whether it's Tyrese Halliburton starting to find his range, Miles Turner being more aggressive from beyond the arc. You've seen areas where that gap has been trimmed in terms of the absence of scoring for the Pacers, but that is noteworthy in that a lot of this roster was not a part of the regular season series. Conversely, for the Celtics, you had injuries to different players in some of those matchups. Jaylen Brown misses a game. Kristaps Porzingis misses a game. The one that you can point to is maybe something to build off of for its simulation, or at least what it was sold to us to be, simulation of postseason basketball, was what the in-season tournament was billed as. And I know that's a controversial point in terms of where you're at as a basketball fan, because that is the inaugural season of the in-season, or the inaugural playing, I beg your pardon, of the in-season tournament this past November. And a lot of people looked at it and said, there's not a way to simulate playoff basketball. It's just a gimmicky tournament. What's it really going to do for the league? Viewership numbers were involved and up compared to other regular season years. We knew that there was interest here locally because of the Pacers run, and there was interest as well from a national perspective of them wanting to pump out that product and it feeling like it mattered more than an average regular season game. The Pacers knock out the Boston Celtics of the quarterfinal at home of the in-season tournament en route to, again, eventually dispatching Milwaukee and then falling to the Lakers in the final out in Las Vegas. But it should be noted, and you're just looking for any statistical trend you can go off of, because as you know going into this series, there's one thing and one thing alone that is the deciding factor for what the Pacers are able to do in this series. And there's different angles, of course, and keys to each game. But if they are going to play the role of spoiler, and don't get it twisted, this would be the role of spoiler. We joked about it yesterday, and hats off to the Pacers social media team for going after the national media with nobody picking them against the Knicks. I think 16 went for New York in some capacity of 5, 6, and 7. Nobody picked the Pacers. That's going to be more of the same here. I can't imagine there's going to be a lot of national selections for the Pacers to actually pull this thing off. But just like it was against New York, and it was necessary, Pascal Siakam was valid for certain. So was Miles Turner. So was the Pacers improving defensively, especially on the defensive glass, an area that they're still weak in, that Boston also excels at. But the key piece, as we know, going into this series is the work of your star player in Tyrese Haliburton. And why I bring up the in-season tournament is when chips were on the line, and whether you think it fully was for Boston or not, it definitely was for the Pacers, because they realized this is an opportunity for national exposure. This is an opportunity to win a trophy that is going to be of significance for the league. It's not the Larry O'Brien trophy, certainly. It is not the championship trophy. But the league has given no indication that the NBA Cup and the chase for that in the in-season tournament is going anywhere. They want this to become a prestigious piece of hardware for any team's trophy case. And we can debate till the cows come home of whether or not it is more valuable for young teams, whether a veteran team like the Lakers who are just chasing accolades, if it was better for them, whatever. You could debate that till the end of time. It is still elimination basketball at a point in the season where it was not occurring beforehand, even if the stakes weren't nearly as high as a playoff series or as a playoff run where legacies are defined. But I bring up the in-season tournament because it's only a 4-game split here. 1 in-season tournament game versus 3 matchups against Boston. In the in-season tournament, when the stars were brightest during the regular season prior to the All-Star game, Tyrese Haliburton, 26 points, 55% from the field, a blistering 45% from beyond the arc, 10 rebounds, 13 assists. I'm not saying he needs to average a triple-double in this series, but if he sniffs anywhere close to those numbers, especially on the points and assists aspect there. By the way, I don't know if I mentioned this, no turnovers. If that's the type of Tyrese Haliburton that you were getting on a nightly basis in this series, the Pacers are going to have a chance. They're going to have a chance to upset Boston and go to the NBA Finals. There are other areas, sure. You always have a TJ McConnell game, or maybe you have a breakout performance once again from Obi Toppin, or maybe Pascal Siakam takes over. And all of those things are vital, and I would even hear you out on the Siakam aspect of this, because it really is a 1A and 1B type of conversation when you look at those two pieces. I'd be willing to hear all of that out for individual games and maybe individual moments. But over the course of the series, Tyrese Haliburton is going to have to be special. That does not mean that if he's not, or if the defense, which is very good on the Boston Celtics side of things, if the defense of Derek White or Drew Holiday, whoever they put on him, Eddie and I were discussing it a little bit before the show, probably Derek White initially there because of the size and length advantage that Haliburton displayed against Holiday in the small sample size of meetings they had. Regardless of which one it is, they are going to try to make life difficult for Tyrese Haliburton. That doesn't mean he needs to force up bad shots. A lot of it will probably be double teams that were sent his way, much like New York did, much like Milwaukee did. And at that point, you're relying on the role players of the Pacers. Another great stretch, and yes, you're asking a lot of him, but another great stretch by the rookie Ben Shepherd, who has suddenly found elite-level range in the playoffs that he displayed in pockets, albeit small pockets, with the rookie struggles that happen in his rookie season. He's been absolutely sensational when the ball is in his hands across the perimeter in the postseason. So you'll need guys like him to step up. You will need your role players to take the burden off of him. But what makes the Pacers special and what made them special in that in-season tournament was the player that they confidently signed last offseason to a rookie extension that will solidify his time here as a franchise player. I want to draw a line in the sand, though, and make the mark. And I'm not trying to make it an easy way out for the Pacers. I'm trying to paint a reality of Boston is very, very good. Throughout the entirety of this regular season, they were picked to leave the East. And there's disrespect, of course, on the Pacers front. Nationally, whether it's from pundits, whether it is from social media, whether you're like me and occasionally just to get a taste of what else is out there from opposing viewpoints, you decide to scour the dark corners of Reddit. That's right. Been there before in a Celtics page just to see what the pulse is over there. Nobody respects the run that Boston has had to go on because while the Pacers have definitively had an easy path to get here, and again, by easy path, I mean health-wise. I don't mean that the opponents they played were not talented. Jalen Brunson is an incredibly gifted player. Damian Lillard was available for a large portion of the Bucks series. Even though he did battle injury through it, he was out there for what was the deciding Game 6 for the Pacers. Yes, you never saw Giannis. It would be a disservice to the Bucks to say that, well, because Giannis wasn't out there does not matter. Sure, it matters to some extent. We said it at the time, though. I think the Pacers still would have won that series. But Boston has had the same amount of injury luck to some extent. The Knicks series was crazy for the Pacers, but they've had the same amount of injury luck to get to this point. Jimmy Butler didn't play. Jimmy Butler was not available for the Miami Heat in that series. That is their best player. The whole ad campaign that's going on right now in the NBA of, oh, it's playoff Tatum. Oh, that's not a thing. You know what I'm talking about. People have been saying playoff insert player here for years, and the NBA decides to play off of that with their ESPN ads. Playoff Jimmy Butler, was a massive rallying cry for the Miami Heat the last 4 years. It's part of the reason that they were able to go to 2 NBA finals of the last 4. He's unavailable. That's off the board for the Celtics. Then you go to the Cavaliers series. There's no Jared Allen out of the gate. He's not available for that series. And then Donovan Mitchell winds up, was it a calf strain? Is that what it was, with a calf string or a hamstring?
I can't remember. He was injured. That's all I know.
Some lower body injury to Donovan Mitchell, who is arguably their best player. Like, Mobley has shown huge strides, and Garland's a talented player too. But Donovan Mitchell, that acquisition they made a year or so ago, that was supposed to be a move that helped push the Cavaliers into true contention in the conference finals, and he's not there. The Celtics aren't getting that same level of criticism that the Pacers did, A, because definitely more injuries in the Knicks series, but B, because they have been viewed as the consensus team to come out of the East all year. And if you're asking me to pick this series, yes, I'm probably naturally going to lean towards Boston because on paper, I think they are the better team. That said, a lot of people are going to jump out of the gate and say, oh, the Pacers are going to get swept. They have no path. This thing is closed. And that's not true. The Pacers, from an offensive standpoint, and Rick Carlisle's right, they do need to be better defensively. But if you're Indiana, you want this to be, even though Boston can counter it a little bit because they're quick too, they were the most highly efficient offensive team in the regular season. Pacers were second. And now here in the postseason, Pacers have been more efficient. It's very small numbers. We're not talking about that big gap, but the Pacers have been the more efficient team. If you're Indiana, your best chance in my mind is this being kind of like it was during that in-season tournament run, where you're putting up 125, 130 a game. Is that feasible against a defense in Boston that, as the cliche goes, defense gets better in the playoffs? Is that a feasible number? Maybe not, but they were able to score at will against New York. Even if New York had injuries, they were able to still do so. They do need to play better defensively because Boston can beat you in so many ways. They take more threes than anybody in the National Basketball Association, and they will beat you on dribble drives from Tatum and Brown and kicking it out to literally anybody on that roster. There's very few players on their starting five and in their rotation that they are not confident in shooting from beyond the arc. So don't get it twisted in that regard. They do have offensive weapons, but the Pacers' best bet is what they have done throughout this entire season, which is setting the pace, setting the tone, and being aggressive from the get-go. Boston will also, though, eat you alive on the offensive glass if you have the same level of whatever you want to call it, mental slips, focused on other things, focused on perhaps sending doubles somewhere or not communicating on help side, whatever it is, there were offensive rebounding opportunities far too often for the New York Knicks, and it nearly buried the Pacers. That same aspect of play will be involved throughout this 7-game series, however long it goes, and the Pacers need to be cognizant of that. The other aspect of the Pacers, and it's part of the reason that they acquired him and why he is in line to likely get a max deal when the summer arrives and the offseason officially goes for the Pacers, is what Pascal Siakam is able to do, both offensively and defensively. And this is where things get tricky for the Pacers, because in theory, Pascal Siakam would likely draw an assignment, I would think, Eddie, of whichever one you don't bring in, whoever you're going to have Nesmith on, of Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. I would assume Siakam draws that other matchup.
You know, with Boston, they did some weird things in the regular season matchups against Indiana. They did have one game against Pascal Siakam, and they kind of did a rotation of different guys. Like, they put Porzingis on him a little bit. They put Drew Holiday on him a little bit. Put Jaylen Brown and Tatum on him as well. So, like, Boston has the optionality, as Kevin Pritchard likes to say, to throw different guys at different people. And I think that's what makes this series so interesting defensively, because I would assume Derek White gets the first crack at Tyrese Haliburton, and then you maybe put Drew Holiday on Siakam or Drew Holiday on Aaron Nesmith, and then you put Brown and Tatum on the two guys that aren't used as much, whether that is Siakam. One of them will have to guard him, and the other being Aaron Nesmith. That way they just don't get tired out through a 7-game series.
I misled the witness there because I was talking so much on offense, and I quickly pivoted before I tossed to you, so that's on me. Siakam offensively, I think you're exactly right in terms of they'll send a number of different bodies to both him and Haliburton. But defensively for the Pacers, the matchup of Tatum and Brown, unlike last series where you could throw doubles at will that you wanted at Jalen Brunson because of where the injuries were for the Knicks, barring injury for the Celtics, those are two high-level players, even though I think Tatum is better, that you probably wanted the luxury to send double teams to. So from a defensive standpoint, Siakam, I would think, draws one of those assignments of Tatum and Brown. Nesmith would draw the other. Is that how you view that going in?
Yeah, I would tend to think that Nesmith would probably get the assignment of Jaylen Brown just because he's more of the size of Nesmith. But, I mean, Aaron Nesmith knows both those guys because of his time in Boston. So it's not like he knows how to not defend either one of those players. So it'll be fascinating to see. Maybe, do you even consider... I don't know. You would have to put Nembhard maybe on the other. Like, you would have to put Nembhard probably on Drew Holiday, and then Tyrese is the question mark for me. It's like, we've seen it with New York. They hunted Tyrese a lot with the screen game to get him on to Brunson. The Pacers didn't do that. How the Pacers try to hide him in that aspect, because that's what teams try to do in the playoffs on the defensive side, will be fascinating to see, because Drew Holiday has not had a great postseason. He hasn't really had a game where he's been efficient scoring. He's been a lot of volume, but not a lot of efficiency. And he's easily probably the fifth guy they go to offensively out of the starting five. Horford takes more shots than Drew Holiday, which is a little bit surprising. So I would expect Tyrese to be on Drew Holiday. Derek White is the guy to watch out, though. Like, if they let Derek White get going, it's going to be a long series.
And for what it's worth, just for listeners, for keeping track of keys to this series, or maybe an area where the Pacers go, it's tough with Siakam because of the lack of matchups against Boston in a Pacers uniform. He was very limited, about 8 minutes in total, when you look at all the matchups, both from Toronto, as he was a member of the Raptors prior to the trade, of course, and Indiana. When you look at when either of those teams, with Siakam being involved, playing the Celtics, only about 8 minutes over 4 games that he spent defending Tatum. in that same span, Siakam spent far more time as a defender on Jaylen Brown. Perhaps that is an area where they look at Brown as a better matchup for Siakam defensively. Either way, the sample size is incredibly small. You're looking at 11 minutes versus 8 minutes by comparison because of just situational basketball and it being different where it is. But the other thing that Eddie brings up that is another key to this, as long as Porzingis is out, and the Celtics will try to counter this, there will be a counter to it for certain. But as long as Porzingis is out, your best call would be in some form of pick and roll fashion of Tyrese Halliburton and Miles Turner trying to pick on Al Horford. Al Horford is, you use unicorn for guys like Porzingis because of their, and that's what they called him when he was coming out of the NBA draft. Maybe that's faded a little bit now, but you use it for guys like Porzingis at the time, Victor Wembanyama, Jokic, like guys that just do it all, that are perfect players throughout their career, and you'd give anything to have them as a part of your franchise. I don't know what the animal equivalent is for Al Horford, but he's 38 and still playing like he's 28. Like at times. I'm not saying he doesn't get winded, but the fact that he's still in the league, still can be asked to be a starter in any capacity and thrive in it to an extent, there's always a point with every player, is admirable. And I tip the cap to Al Horford. But if you're looking for somewhere to tire him out, to find openings for action in the paint, in my mind, it would be an involvement of Tyrese Halliburton, and assuming the defensive assignment, conversely, is Al Horford and Miles Turner, pick and roll action there, because you're going to tire out, in theory, Horford. Now, they can counter that on their offensive side, Eddie, by having Horford out on one of the wings as a perimeter threat, and that takes away arguably one of the Pacers' best defensive chess pieces, which is the shot blocking ability of Miles Turner.
Yeah, I mean, that's what Horford will do. He'll stand in the corner and shoot corner threes. That's just what he does. I mean, he sets the occasional screen, but you talked about the national 16-0 New York, Indiana, 14-2. ESPN released.
Okay. Wow.
ESPN released their predictions. 2 Pacers predictions. Jerry Bembry has Pacers in 7 with Tyrese Halliburton as the series MVP.
Wow.
And Bobby Marks has the Pacers
the
in
cap
6.
guru. Wow.
And he has Pascal Siakam as the MVP. The other 14 are on the Celtics. 2 people picked Celtics in 7. 4 people picked Celtics in 5. 8 Celtics in 6. 9 votes for Tatum for series MVP. 2 for Jaylen Brown. 2 for Derek White. 1 for Tyrese. 1 for Drew Holiday. 1 for Siakam.
You're going to get a clear indication for where this series goes based on Game 3. Because the way the playoffs have gone for the Pacers, at least in a 2-series sample size, they probably drop Game 1. You're banking on, if you're a Celtics fan and somehow found this station, you'd be banking on the rest overpowering the rust argument in terms of the days off that they've had, and perhaps the Pacers are a little tired out and you slaughter them in the Garden today. The Pacers were able to win Game 2 against Milwaukee, not so lucky against New York. Ultimately, though, both those series turned for Indiana once things shifted back to Gainbridge Fieldhouse. So I'm not going to give a full cop-out. I'll have a prediction by the end of the show. I want the Pacers to win. I'd love to see it in 6 or 7, but for that to happen, both those two, Bobby Marks included, that make a prediction there, you're going to need just special performances from the likes of Tyrese Halliburton, and in one of those cases, Pascal Siakam. We'll take our first break. When we come back, Evan Sidery going to join us, national NBA reporter. He will take us through both Pacers and Celtics thoughts going into Game 1 tonight, and perhaps we will dabble in a little bit of the other side of the bracket as the Timberwolves, I beg your pardon, and the Mavericks get set a little bit later in the week. Tomorrow, in fact, is when they tip off Game 1 of the Western Conference Finals. It's Query & Company. You're listening on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
Come on, Indy. Don't use the spring to...
Pacers-Celtics, game one of the Eastern Conference Finals, tipping off at 8:30 this evening on ESPN. Of course, you can hear it on these very airwaves on the Pacers radio network. Eddie Garrison, since I don't read show notes, what time is broadcast coverage beginning on these very airwaves?
Are you kidding me?
I understand, but that's why I'm tossing it to you as the official producer of the Pacers radio network. You're always more in the know than I am.
Okay, well, Jimmy, what time is tip tonight?
8:30. All right, give it to me then. I know nothing about
Tip
tonight's
is at 8 o'clock. Pregame is at 7:30.
You know what happened?
Game 3 at the Bridge.
Yeah. Here's
Is
what
at
happened.
8:30
Here's what
on
happened.
Saturday.
Here's what happened. I'm in a group chat right now, and we were planning a watch party, and one of the occupants of said group chat is a father of two, and we had 8:30 implanted in the mind because that was the initial thought because he would have time to put the kids down, and now he does not, so he's going to be a half hour late. So that's my fault. I got my wires crossed. 8 o'clock is tip, so that would mean pregame show is?
7:30.
7:30 for action here on these very airwaves, 93.5, 107.5. The Fan, and of course, after the game, stay tuned for the World's Greatest post-game show with Eddie White and company. Mark Boyle on the call with Pat Boyle and Eddie Gill, the whole gang, and Eddie Garrison behind
No
the
Pat Boylan tonight.
No Pat Boylan tonight.
Correct. He's got fever duty, so he's missing games 1, 2, and 3, and Jeremiah Johnson will make the switch from television to radio.
Love the crossover platform promoting there. Shout out to Jeremiah Johnson and all the best to Pat Boylan on the fever calls. We shift back, though, to Pacers, Celtics, and maybe a little bit of Timberwolves, Mavericks. Joining us now on the, I'm going to butcher it now. I'm going to butcher it because Jake does it so well on the always popular but shockingly unsponsored guest line. It is Evan Sidery of Forbes Sports and Sporting News. Evan, how are you on a Tuesday?
Jimmy, I'm doing great. How about yourself?
I am doing fantastic. It's always great to talk to you. Always good to be talking hoops, especially when the Pacers are involved this late into the season. Let's start there with Pacers-Celtics, and I'll get right into the kid gloves are off conversation. Do you generally make predictions going into a series? And if no, we'll move on. But if yes, do you already have one here?
I do, yeah. I like to analyze like 24 or 48 hours ahead of time. So I have both sides of the coin here. I have my finals matchup already in place. But I don't know if you want me to spoil that just here, just talk about Pacers-Celtics here. But I do think the Pacers – I'll tease it a little bit here, Jimmy. I'm going to surprise and say they're going to outright win tonight.
I think they outright win in game one, so they get their first game one win in these playoffs. Is that more the fatigue or the rest factor versus rust factor of the Celtics and just the Pacers playing in a consistent groove? Is that a matchup you like? What stands out to you to the point tonight that you feel the Pacers are going to win on the road at TD Garden?
Yeah, I really liked your first point there. It's really where I was going with that. And I think the Pacers have found such a great rhythm in the last week or so, playing completely together. Not only are they sharing the ball, they're playing at a historic offensive rate, for those who don't know it. Unfortunately for the national media, like they only want to talk about New York and Los Angeles, but this team is putting up even better numbers efficiency-wise than those Denver Nuggets did last season in certain metrics. And that just goes to show how elite this team is when they're fully locked in together. When Tyrese Halliburton's being aggressive offensively and Pascal Siakam's being aggressive, you add in Miles Turner, he's hitting 45% of his threes in the playoffs. Andrew Nembhard, over 40% of his threes. Ben Shepherd's at 47.5%. All their guys are shooting elite as far as three-point range goes. They're spreading the ball around, playing great defense. I think depth is really what is standing out to me in this series, and especially game one. I think there's kind of all the momentum towards them after that huge game seven. I think we're going to see the Celtics kind of adjust on the fly here throughout this series.
For years during the Big Three era of the league, whenever you had a team that had so many eggs in one basket of stars, for example, the Celtics in 2008, the Heat, who were the adversaries in the last time the Pacers were in the conference finals back in 2014, the Warriors once they acquired Kevin Durant, a lot of those super teams, if you will, sacrificed depth or at least sacrificed high dollar depth in the name of having talented starters that they were going to send out there for 40, 48 minutes a night. The Celtics aren't exactly that, because I don't know if I would label them a super team necessarily. They're pretty darn close, especially when Porzingis is healthy, but we know he'll miss the first two games, so we'll remove him from the equation and just look at who's out there for Boston. With a 7 to sometimes 8, but usually 7-man rotation for the Celtics, is Tyrese Halliburton right in saying their depth can change the course of this series? or is that slightly overblown because of the star caliber 5 that are out there for Boston?
I don't think it's overblown right now. I think once, like you mentioned, Kristaps Porzingis comes back, which seems like all indications are right now, it should be when they come back for the series in Indianapolis for Game 3. That seems like the likely target date for Kristaps Porzingis. I think the first couple games, though, I think they actually do hold an advantage there just because they're going to be playing almost 40-year-old Al Horford at center for almost 35, 40 minutes these first couple games. And after behind him, you have Luke Cornett, who is just a journeyman big man, a young guy who really hasn't done much in the league. I think Miles Turner and Pascal Siakam, those are two huge matchups there where they should just absolutely dominate in those situations. I think especially for a guy like Horford, guys like Tatum and Brown who tend to get fatigued pretty early. I think if you're able to push the pace, run those guys up as far as having these guys play, I imagine 38 to 42 minutes a game, every single game in this series for that starting 5 because when you look at that depth, Jimmy, I mean, they have Sam Hauser, they have Luke Cornett, Peyton Pritchard's really their sixth man that plays 20-plus minutes per game. And then outside of that, maybe you throw in O'Shea Brissett, the former Pacer, for about 5-10 minutes there. But their depth is really not that great. And I think the Pacers really could take advantage of that. A guy like T.J. McConnell, I think, is going to be huge in this series yet again. I think he should really dominate that match against Peyton Pritchard, in my opinion. I think he's going to be a really irritant, too, against a guy like Drew Holiday. So I actually think that these first couple games, I think the Pacers have to take advantage here, at least split in Boston, because once Porzingis comes back, that's when Boston really does look like that super team.
Evan Sidery is our guest. You can follow him on Twitter at @eSidery, and, of course, find his work at Forbes and the Sporting News. Evan, you mentioned T.J. McConnell, and then you brought up Peyton Pritchard, and I'd be lying to you if I didn't say I'm getting excited for that storyline within the game of when those two are on the floor together, and that's just for second unit type of minutes whenever you likely see those two. Is there a scenario with how good and how dominant and even lifeline-like the Pacers' second unit has been for them with extending leads or staying in ball games? Is there a scenario where that Pritchard-McConnell matchup is not one that we just laugh about, but is really a deciding pendulum in how this series goes?
No, I think you're right on the money there. I really think it's in at least my top 5 or 6 storylines for this series and really swing factors is that you see the impact of T.J. McConnell throughout this postseason. He had a rough game 1 against Milwaukee, but ever since then, he's been on fire. He's averaging 12 points per game on elite efficiency for a guy that he does most of his damage in the mid-range. As we know, he's a great passer, a great irritant on the defensive end. These kind of players, like a T.J. McConnell, they thrive in these playoff situations when the game slows down a little bit. Maybe not so for the Pacers because they like to pick up the pace there. But I think a team in this series like Boston who loves to slow it down, who likes to get grimy a little bit, and make it a slower paced game, which is what they're going to try to do in this one throughout this series. They don't want it to be a 135 to 127 kind of game like the Pacers want it to be. So a guy like T.J. McConnell, if he can go in there, make it hard on players like a Drew Holiday, a Derek White, for example. I think Derek White's going to be a real key as far as T.J. McConnell goes here. That's going to be one guy to watch out for in that matchup. So I really do think McConnell and that bench, if they can get going here, I think they really can swing a couple games.
I mentioned at the start of the show, and it's not exactly breaking news, but I mentioned this at the beginning of the program, that for the Pacers, the opportunity that's in front of them, there'd be no shame if they get bounced, but they do have a real opportunity here to make their first NBA Finals since 2000. And so much of that, as the entire playoffs, as the entire series has gone, and yes, I'll hear an argument for Pascal Siakam, but goes with Tyrese Halliburton. So naturally, you look at what he was able to do in his meetings against Boston in the regular season, even though, as we've documented, if you documented as well, the rosters are a little bit different, especially for the Pacers, and there's not really a fair sample size to measure the totality of those rosters post-Pascal Siakam trade. But still, we look at that data. In the 4 games that Tyrese Halliburton was involved against the Celtics, 3 of which were regular season games, 1 was the in-season tournament. The regular season, 12 points, 34% from beyond the arc, 23% from 3, 3 rebounds, 7 assists to 2 turnovers. That in-season tournament game, which is what I highlighted at the start of the show, 26 points, 55% from the field, 45% from beyond the arc, 10 rebounds, 13 assists, no turnover. Let's take away the rebounds because I'm not expecting him to be walking triple-double. If he has a 27-point per game, 12 assists per game, to 1 turnover a game type of stat line, and he's efficient at a high level, is that enough?
I mean, it might sound crazy to the national media out there, but I really don't think that's out of the realm of possibility if that does happen. I think the main key off of that is if Halliburton's playing that well, you have to have Pascal Siakam and other guys like Miles Turner, Andrew Nembhard, Aaron Nesmith all put up really good lines as well, at least carrying their water, so to say, as far as shooting the three-pointer and really making their wide open shots to Halliburton will help them out with there. If they're able to do that, coupled with Halliburton putting up what we saw the first couple months of the season, I don't see why this series can go 6 or 7. I'm really of the opinion. I'll tell you here, Jimmy. I think the Celtics win this in 6, but I think it's going to be a very, very, very tough 6 games. I would not be shocked at all if Indiana, like I said, steals game 1. Maybe they're up 2-1 in this series after game 3. I think that's something to really watch out for. I think the depth, them trying to run them off the court a little bit. If Tyrese Halliburton gets going aggressively on the offensive end, I think there's a real chance for him to take this series as far as making it go the distance or even making it 6 games. I won't go as far as saying beating the Celtics team because they've been so good all year long. But even to say, Jimmy, like if we would have said 6 months ago, the Pacers are 4 wins away from the NBA Finals, that's still just crazy for me to even put it in my head right now. I would have never thought that would even be a possibility for this team. So what they're playing with is house money at this point, and that's a really dangerous team to play against.
Yeah, we joked about it yesterday that you could point to any moment in the season, whether it was the start of the year, the acquisition of Pascal Siakam, hell, even a couple of games ago in New York, in the Garden. How are they going to find a way to win there? Can they really make it to the conference finals? Is really a team to do that? So, yeah, I'm right there with you. The achievement itself is an incredible one, and it's going to be remembered as a successful season, regardless of how this thing goes against Boston. But, as you mentioned, an opportunity is clearly in front of them. You mentioned likely Celtics in 6. That's probably where I lean, Celtics in 6 or 7. I just don't think, both from a pride standpoint and their ability at home, that the Pacers are going to get swept. But you mentioned a steal potentially tonight in game 1. Let's say that does not happen, and it's a 2-0 hole for the Pacers, just like they were in against New York. Is that insurmountable against this Boston team, or how much do you weigh in there the fact the Pacers have yet to lose at Gamebridge in the postseason?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, just with how injured that Knicks team was and then how continuously injured they got after that 2-0 series lead, I think that OG Anunoby injury really changed everything for the Knicks in that series. I think that really was a brutal blow for them. We saw Siakam take advantage of that. Obviously, Tyrese Halliburton took more advantage of that as the series went on as well. You don't really have that luxury against this Celtics team. Even with Porzingis out, they're still a dominant basketball team. They have Jason Tatum, I think is still a top 7-8 player in the NBA. Jaylen Brown's probably a top 30, top 35 player in the NBA. Drew Holiday's in the top 52. Derek White, the way he's played this year, is a top 50 kind of player. And then you add in Porzingis when he's back, probably for game 3 or game 4. It's a top 40 player in the league. So you have 5 top 50 players probably in the NBA right now on this Celtics roster, all in their starting 5. But I think when we talk more and more about this series, Jimmy, again, it's been their thing all postseason long. But if you have Tyrese Halliburton and Pascal Siakam play well, but have that bench really dominate those minutes where those guys are sitting maybe for a couple minutes here and there, I think it's going to be a lot more competitive than national media is saying. So I really think it's going to be very, very competitive.
Evan, last thing before we get you out of here, from a matchup standpoint, we've already highlighted that second unit run with T.J. McConnell and Peyton Pritchard. We've talked about Tyrese Halliburton, his importance of trying to replicate what was a single elimination one-off in the in-season tournament to being a consistent takeover conference finals MVP type of performance over the course of this 7-game series. Of the other matchups, whether it is the Pacers setting the pace and putting up high volume scoring, whether it is their defense being a tick better, as Rick Carlisle has preached all year, or whether it is that Miles Turner, Al Horford matchup for as long as it's there, which is the real X factor for the Pacers? Or if you have another one off the top of your head, you can throw that out there as well.
Yeah, so I'm going to go with one you didn't mention. I think a player that's going to loom very large in this series, just based off his experience and based off, I think, his matchup, he should do well against. That's Pascal Siakam. We saw late in that series that he was really taking over the basketball game in key moments. You saw his postseason experience shine through. I think he's really catching a rhythm, as are the Pacers, as far as setting him up now offensively. He's now played over 50 games with this Pacers team. They're setting him up in the perfect spots now. Him and Halliburton are fully in sync yet again, in my opinion, so that's great to see. I think he has a great matchup defensively, whether it's against Jason Tatum or Al Horford. If it's Al Horford, that's going to be a dominant matchup for Siakam all game long to get switched into that matchup. But even not, whether it's Jason Tatum, I think he has a real aggressiveness advantage over Jason Tatum. Or even it's Drew Holiday. I would not be shocked at all if they put Drew Holiday on him either. He has the big size advantage over Drew Holiday. So I think if they can have Pascal Siakam be an all-star, all-NBA level player, give him 25-plus points per game, then you add in potentially a Halliburton breakout on top of that, that's where I think the series can get really interesting. So I think Pascal Siakam, that trade they made, Jimmy, these are the kind of moments where if Siakam really is that kind of superstar level player they acquired for, he should make this series very interesting.
It's part of the reason, as you mentioned, they acquired him. It's part of the reason he solidified that faith with Game 7, Siakam making an appearance against the Knicks, 20 points for him there, 8 of 15 from the field to go along with 4 rebounds and 4 assists. But Evan Sidery, you don't think we'll get the chance to see Game 7, Siakam. Celtics in 6 is where you go. Is that correct?
That is correct, yeah. But if the Pacers, let's say if they steal tonight, and if let's go up 2-1, I think if they can go up split tonight or one of the first 2 games, then you at least split 1 in Indy, and you go back tied 2-2. I might be all bets off at that point. That'd be really fun to see.
Maybe I'm drinking the house money Kool-Aid too much, but just the fact that we have Pacers and Racers back and there's meaningful basketball played this late into May is good enough for me. It's going to be a great series, popcorn-ready type of series for certain. Evan, appreciate your work as always, and hopefully we get a chance to talk to you out of the rest of the postseason run, and if not, definitely sometime in the offseason.
Absolutely. Anytime. Appreciate it.
That is Evan Sidery. Again, you can follow him on Twitter at eSidery. Covers all things NBA for Forbes Sports as well as the sporting news, and always on top of the latest in ongoing conversations surrounding offseason moves, whether it's coaching searches, whether it's player trade requests, whatever the case may be. Evan Sidery has you covered. You can follow him on Twitter at eSidery. Still to come at the top of the hour, one of our favorites, Stephen Holder, will join us. We'll get the latest on the start of Colts OTAs, his outlook for what he wants to see over the coming days as the Colts are on that track for their final sessions between now and the summer break. And then, of course, the countdown to training camp begins. But Stephen Holder will give us the latest when we return 2 breaks from now. When we come back on the other side, a little bit more on Pacers-Celtics as the countdown continues for Game 1 of the Eastern Conference Finals, why a combination of 2 players might be another difference maker that pushes the Pacers ahead of Boston. We'll get into that when we come back on Query & Company.
Want to cut cooling bills without cutting?
Evan Sidery of Forbes Sports and the Sporting News. Conversation will be up a little bit later on the Podcast Center, as well as wherever you get your podcasts. Podcast Center, though, of course, on 1075thefan.com. Because of that long run, not a full time to dive in and pay off that tease appropriately. I will say, though, it's not just TJ McConnell leading that second unit. It is those type of strong connections games that you get from the tandem of McConnell and Obi Toppin that might be difference makers depending on where second unit play arrives. Ben Shepherd, of course, as well, but Toppin is a name that we've yet to say today on today's show, but you're exactly right, Eddie. Ben Shepherd as well, off the bench, has been a godsend for the Pacers, especially beyond the arc, and has helped somewhat close that gap from a narrative standpoint of the Buddy Hield threes and where, now that they're gone, where do they come from? It's been a collective effort. Toppin has made up some of that ground, but so too has Ben Shepherd, especially in the playoffs, providing that nice spark off the bench. So we'll dive into that a little bit more once Jake returns in hour number 2. But our conversation to start hour number 2 takes us to another pro franchise in the Circle City in the state of Indiana. That is Indianapolis Colts. OTAs begin today. And who better to talk to than Stephen Holder? Next.
Hey, it's Andy Sweeney for Universal.
This is Query & Company on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. Happy Tuesday to you. Happy Pacers game day as well. Talked a lot of Pacers-Celtics as game one gets underway at 8 o'clock is tip-off tonight on ESPN, and pregame starting at 7:30 on the Pacers radio network.
Bingo.
How about that, Eddie Garrison? Look at me. Nice response. Going on a hot streak. We'll try to do the same here as we shift our attention to the Colts. We head to the always popular, very popular with kids especially, and shockingly unsponsored guest line. It is Stephen Holder of ESPN.com taking some time with us. Stephen, how are you?
Excuse me, doing great. How are you?
I'm doing great. I apologize. There's not going to be the same giddy banter and inside track jokes that you and Jake have. Maybe potentially if he joins us midway through this segment as he's wrapping things up at the Speedway. But I'll do my best to carry along. And I will start by Eddie sort of spoiled the initial first question, but I want you to clarify it for me as well, because it's always weird when you get back into the routine of a practice session, and for some guys, the first time they're really taking the field with a complete roster or as close as you can get with OTAs. Scheduling-wise, for the Colts, a number of publications, I won't oust them or blast them on air, listed as today as the beginning of OTAs. From the Colts side of things, when does the real action take place over the multiple days that OTAs last for them?
So this is the first week of OTA, so that's accurate. Now, what's tricky is that the days that the media is allowed to watch are only select days. The first of those days is tomorrow. So we don't necessarily get the first practice, but it's the first opportunity for the media to see the full squad practice. Sure. So they'll go, if I have my dates correct here, this week, next week, and then I believe the following week they'll have their mandatory mini camp. So they're having a little bit of an abbreviated off season this year. They were on site for an additional week last year beyond what they're staying this year. I've asked Shane Steichen about that, and it really boils down to a couple things. Number one, they've had a really good turnout, really consistent turnout for the voluntary work, so they're happy about that. And number two, it's the second year doing this, so they're not a team with a new head coach and new systems and new staff, so it does make things a little easier. So anyway, that's where we're at, and we'll get a good look at them tomorrow.
For your checklist tomorrow, we'll start first with the initial selection in the 2024 NFL draft for the Colts and Leatu Latu and what he's going to be able to bring for Indianapolis, whether it's as a starter out of the gate, whether they ease him in. Either way, the early returns, at least from rookie minicamp, if I remember correctly, was, wow, okay, he's looking good, but he's looking good against guys that are fighting for their NFL future, that are undrafted free agents or maybe your later round picks. What do we get to see when he's up against the very best that the Colts have to offer on the opposite side with first-team reps? Is he at the top of your rookie checklist going into OTAs?
I think so, yeah, and I think what you outlined is pretty accurate in terms of the situation. He did have that success against guys who will probably not be or likely won't be on an NFL roster this year, or at least certainly not starting in the NFL. So it's just a glimpse. But I think here's the thing to take away from what he did in rookie minicamp, which, granted, okay, is just that's like preschool compared to what he's going to face, right? But here's the thing. You want to see a guy in that scenario when he is the most talented guy on the field. He should look like it. He should look the part. He should go out there and he should absolutely dominate. And he did. They could not block him. They were completely overmatched, and it was kind of a waste of everyone's time, frankly, because it's like, this is not a very realistic look for either party, for Latu or for these guys who we know can't block him. So I say that flippantly, right? Any work is good work, but I do think it's what you want to see. That is the result that you want when you have that first introduction, that first mini camp for the rookies. I would say I saw a similar impact to a degree with A.D. Mitchell, their second round wide receiver. and that's also promising. So I think those two guys, certainly starting with Latu, see how he fits in, but I think those two guys are at the top of my list in terms of the rookies that I want to take a look at.
Well, you do bring up A.D. Mitchell, and I want to spend a little bit of time there real quick. Stephen Holder is our guest, covers the Colts for ESPN.com. Colts OTAs begin this week, and as you mentioned, open to the media first day tomorrow, correct, in terms of when you'll be able to see them in action? Okay, so for A.D. Mitchell and Shane Steichen in a combination with Reggie Wayne leading that wide receiver room, from the conversations you've had, from what you've seen through games you've attended on the beat, how complicated compared to, say, other asks around the NFL will Shane Steichen's offense and learning that playbook be for Mitchell as a rookie?
Well, probably somewhat challenging, but I would also say there's a very promising aspect to this that I think we can look to. And it's the fact that he was able to transfer from Georgia to Texas and play in Steve Sarkisian's offense, which is, I wouldn't say it's NFL level, but my understanding of it, and I'm not an expert on the Texas offense, but my understanding of it is that he does have a lot of elements. He's one of the coaches that people look to as one of the brighter offensive coaches in college football. So there's going to be a fair amount of volume and that kind of thing. And he was able to come in and in a matter of months, not only pick it up, but excel and have his best season. And I think that speaks to his ability to make this kind of transition. And here's the thing. He doesn't even have to play the same kind of role that he played at Texas, where he was obviously one of their top weapons. I mean, he initially won't be that in Indianapolis. He's going to have, I would imagine, a limited role, and they'll probably ask him to play one particular position on the field, as opposed to learn this spot, this route, that route, from this side versus that side, inside, outside. I don't think it's going to be that. You don't tend to do that with rookie wide receivers who are, unless they're going to be, sort of a Justin Jefferson type of guy who's never
Jamar Chase out of the gate. Right. Yeah.
Right. So anyway, long answer, but I think he will make the transition. I think he's demonstrated he can make the transition. Will there be more volume because it's the NFL? Yes, you have to have more volume in the NFL because defenses are too good. But this guy, from all indications, has pretty good football IQ.
Is his ceiling, not this year, but in terms of his career ascension, because you mentioned he's not going to be asked out of the gate with how this offense is built and what's there for him. He's not going to be asked out of the gate to be a wide receiver one, a takeover deep threat, though he is praised for his big play ability that can open up something for this offense. It's part of the reason why you look at that opening on the roster sheet. It's him and Alec Pierce likely going at that spot. But we've seen Chris Ballard, and I will give credit here, Michael Pittman Jr., even if that never-ending debate, is he a wide receiver one or not, he is by definition wide receiver one on the Colts depth chart, and that's a second-round selection. And you've seen second-round selections in the past develop into high-level, close to, and even some cases exactly that, a wide receiver one. Is there a level of confidence in that building that as he develops, he can be as, albeit differently situationally for what he does in the field, he can be as valuable of a find as was, say, Michael Pittman Jr. and what he developed into be?
Certainly, potentially, yeah. I think the jury's still out. I think Michael Pittman had a more accomplished college career. So I would say that's one key difference between them. And I believe Pittman was a 4-year player. A.D. Mitchell, played 3 years in college, and one of those seasons, I believe, only played, I think his sophomore year, only played 4 or 5 games, was injured a lot. So he doesn't have the body of work that Michael Pittman had coming out of school. But he also has attributes that Michael Pittman does not have, right? He doesn't have that additional gear that A.D. Mitchell has. So he has some things going for him that, from a skill perspective that Michael Pittman doesn't. So that gives him a little bit of an edge, maybe to get to his ceiling or whatever that ceiling is. He does have to be. I think Michael Pittman was a more polished player just generally overall when he came into the league. you could look at him and see he understood the game at a high level and played it at a high level. And I don't mean he was just good. I mean, he played like a guy who had a lot of experience. Now, that's not true for A.D. Mitchell, or not as true. So he'll have to demonstrate that. And we'll see. I don't think we know enough yet to say that he can do that in the short term. But in the long term, why can't he, right? Why can't he? He's a big guy with speed and, from all accounts, pretty reliable hands. If he can be a consistent route runner and be a precise route runner, he's going to create additional separation that way that will help him on the shorter routes, because that top end speed helps you certainly on deeper routes. But when you're only running a 7-yard in cut, you've got to be able to do that with technique. You're not going to outrun someone in 10 yards. You've got to be able to do it by creating that separation with good technique and precise routes. That's where he's got to prove that he can be that kind of guy. And then I think you'll start to see a guy who has, the full repertoire, maybe, or at least within his grasp. So that's what I'm interested to see. Can he be good on the details? Can A.D. Mitchell be a guy who is more than just a guy who outruns people and makes big plays down the field, which we know he can do? It's very much the conversation I think that you have heard with Alec Pierce. We know he can run. We know he can get deep. Can you do the other stuff as well? I'm not saying that either of them can't. I just think it's something they'll have to prove they can do on a consistent basis.
Well, you're spot on about the polished aspect of that, and perhaps that's not a fully fair comparison or an ask of A.D. Mitchell, given how polished, as you mentioned, Michael Pittman Jr. was coming out. I guess more or less the parallel though.
But we're also talking not today. I think we're talking in the long term, and so being unpolished today doesn't bother me necessarily either. So just to clarify that, right? I think we're talking long term. For me, that doesn't bother me. Can you get there? Is the question.
And on my front, with re-clarifying it, I guess more or less the outline there is Ballard has shown, even though I've criticized him as much as anybody, he's found value at receiver. That's not just, let's pick a guy in the first round and get on with it. I mean, there's at least been examples to where even if it's a second round selection, maybe it develops into a valuable piece down the line. Stephen Holder is our guest, covers the Colts for ESPN.com. One of the other big storylines post NFL draft and throughout the offseason has been, what is the contingency plan should something happen with Jonathan Taylor? If it's a season like it was a couple years ago where he's embattled in injuries, or if you're just trying to have confidence in whoever your backup is, if you need to give a couple of snaps of rest for Jonathan Taylor. There is a lot of bodies along the Colts depth chart as it stands for that running back slot, whether it's Trey Sermon, whether it's Evan Hull, whether it's Tyler Goodson, to name a few. I know they'll probably get into the real cut down of that and decision-making of that as training camps arrives, but what does the OTA sessions provide for those names and others that are wanting to hold that backup role?
Yeah, I mean, right now, unless they have future roster moves, which is always possible at running back, right? That's always a fluid position on every roster, but unless they have future roster moves, you just named it. That's the depth chart in some order. Those are the guys right now. They've been in the system at least for a year in every case, so that gives them a little bit of a leg up. But they're all unproven in their own way. I think they're going to have a lot to prove, and I think each day, that's why every practice and every snap is going to matter with these guys, because it doesn't take much to separate yourself when really no one's really distinguished themselves, outside of isolated moments. I know that the Colts, for example, they like Goodson. They like his ability to be a pass catcher out of the backfield. A little bit of the skill set that Zach Moss had, even though I think they're different types of athletes, but certainly Zach Moss was an accomplished pass catcher out of the backfield, for example, reliable there. So that's where he could kind of play a role. Evan Hull as well, he has done that. He's also an accomplished runner in college, but that rookie season got cut short. We don't know much. We haven't seen him at this level. So every snap these guys take, Trey Sermon, as a veteran, has been around a little bit, but he's bounced around. He's never really established a consistent role in this league. So what is he? What can he be? I don't know. That's kind of where we are. We're still learning about them, and I think the Colts are too, to a great degree, because they had such a good backfield last year. But there is a golden opportunity there for someone, because they are going to try to take some load off of Jonathan Taylor, even though they ran him a lot last year. I don't know that that's the plan necessarily this year, especially with Anthony Richardson back. You would think they would try to use him a little bit differently and not overload him as much as they did at times last year, which I don't think was necessarily the plan. But we'll see. They also, we've also heard Shane Steichen say he'll go with the hot hand. So, and that hand got pretty hot at times last year with Taylor. So we'll see how that goes.
You mentioned the chance, as there's always a presence of a chance of a roster move being made or a veteran acquisition being made, especially at running back, because there's so often moments in an offseason, magnified the most probably once you get to training camp and cut down days of, so-and-so is available now. Maybe that's somebody you want to bring in. Is there a point before the start of the regular season where you've crossed a line to, no, we don't want to bring in this veteran because we like enough what we have and like the way things have progressed that we don't want to rock the boat of the depth chart? Is there a point in the offseason where, okay, barring injury, probably not bringing anybody else into that room?
Yeah, it becomes much less likely once you get through the end of these off-season workouts, I think. And, when you get to training camp, there will be a lot of roster moves, but I do think they tend to be the result of injury for the most part. You will see, and running back, for example, is one of those spots, wide receiver, cornerback. Those are those spots where you tend to play a lot of guys in the preseason. So when you lose one or two and you've got, another week of training camp left, that's a lot of snaps. So you'll see guys get picked up and guys come into camp when guys get worked out or put through workouts. And so you may see acquisitions in those scenarios, but they oftentimes don't tend to stick because they are coming in cold. They have a lot of ground to make up. They don't know the offense. They're having to learn it on the fly. I mean, it's very hard to excel in those scenarios unless you're just more talented than the other guys. So, I'm not saying, it's a no-go once you're done with off-season workouts, but really the roster moves once you get to training camp, those are driven by injuries for the most part. So I think what they have is what they have for right now. There's always that one opportunity, however, at the final roster cuts. When the waiver wire comes across, you certainly will consider some moves there, and the Colts have done that in the past. But I don't know. Number 2 running back's a pretty important spot on the team. I don't know that you're going fishing for that spot at that point, a week before the regular season. That doesn't seem like the way to go, in my opinion.
Stephen Holder joins us, Colts beat writer for ESPN.com. Lastly, Stephen, I think you had reporting on this as well, but your colleague at ESPN, Jeremy Fowler, mentioned at the beginning of the month with an update to SportsCenter on Anthony Richardson that, quote, "This is progressing really well. I'm told Richardson feels he's full go at this point." Then I'll skim a little bit. They could hold him out for OTAs, 11-man work, minicamp, but the feeling is he wants to get started. Internally, has there been a decision made there yet? And what, if anything, can we read if they hold him out a couple days or if there is any extended holdout for him to make sure rehab is still where they want to be versus getting him back out there like he probably wants to and get back started on his de facto rookie campaign development? Where are we at there, and do you expect any limitations for Anthony Richardson in OTAs?
I can tell you with relative certainty he's going to go full speed, and he will not have limitations. The only possible limitation will be if he has any soreness, they'll back off. And I'm talking about in the shoulder, right? If he has any soreness in that shoulder, and that's a day-by-day thing. They want to ensure that they don't give him too much of a workload, but they are ready. The plan right now is for them to move forward these next 3 weeks with Anthony Richardson taking all of the first-team snaps. He is ready to go. He looks great. In fact, I can tell you, having visited with him in Florida while he was working out, before he came back for off-season workouts, the workload that he was handling then was about equal to the workload they do in OTAs. So they were, in a way, almost modeling what he was going to have to do once OTAs got started. And he was handling it well at that point 6 weeks ago.
Wow.
So now that he's back under the team's supervision, they have all that. They have all that information. They consulted with the Colts trainers the whole way, so they know that, and he responded well to it. So they're proceeding pretty much in the same fashion as well.
So at this point, he will be able to go about it like it is a recovered and ready to turn the page and begin his de facto rookie season then, with
That's
monitoring
correct.
how
Yeah.
he is.
That's correct. Yeah, always, of course, right. Always with the caveat that if there's any soreness, then we back off. But there hasn't, apparently, to this date or to this point, there hasn't been any issue, and all signs are go right now. So it's great news, and I really think that's the one thing. If you're a Colts fan, it's such a comforting thing to be able to sleep at night knowing that the quarterback is in good shape, and there's no indication that there are any issues there. Believe me, I have lived through the Andrew Luck era. I've been looking for all the signs. This is different. He's in great shape, and he's ready to roll.
Yeah, I think actually most of the media corps got some type of, whether honorary or official PhD in medical sports science with everything that went on in the Andrew Luck era, but we digress. That's great news. You're right. It's always great to be able to breathe a bit of a sigh of relief and know that the franchise player, the hopeful franchise player in QB1 can start anew with OTA's full go. Steven, always appreciate catching up with you, and I can't afford to pay the fee to sit with Jake, but if maybe Eddie and I outturn our pockets, maybe we can get you to a playoff game with Jake before it's all said and done.
Hey, no worries at all. Hey, listen, you don't have to pay me anything. You're good. You're good.
Oh, I'm good. I appreciate that.
That's only unique to Jake.
Thank you. I'm glad to know that I'm away scot-free here. Steven, enjoy OTAs, and we'll talk to you next week.
See you.
That is Steven Holder of ESPN.com, covers the Colts. Eddie, I believe we actually have some breaking news to get to. This just in, via remote, it is the namesake. Jake Query is back aboard Query and Company. Jake, safe and sound, all things good from the fastest rookie luncheon?
I can hear you, by the way. I heard you talking with Steven there. Here's the thing. Just got done emceeing the fastest rookie luncheon. Thank you to the American Dairy Association of Indiana. I am going to maintain my innocence here. It appeared as though that I did it with Derek Schultz, and Derek, I think, we looked afterwards, and I think I had one page missing in my script. So if you were in the audience, you might have noticed that it was a little discombobulated. We did the best we could. And then apparently, and I unfortunately, I threw away the script that I had, but the American Dairy Association of Indiana presents a check to the winning driver along with the swig of milk for $10,000 in Victory Lane. And I am going to maintain, I promise you, I looked at it like 6 times. Now, I'm a little tired, so the zeros bounced around. Apparently, I said on the stage it's $100,000. So I don't know if they're coming after me for the $90,000 difference, but if, in fact, Kyle Larson, Christian Rasmussen, Kiffin Simpson, Marcus Armstrong, Tom Blumquist, if one of the rookies in this year's field happens to win the race, then my apologies, it's actually $10,000 instead of $100,000, which is still very generous from a great sponsor from the American Dairy Association.
Are you at all
Kyle
worried?
Larson's
Are you at all worried
that?
that you have set milk production up 200% to cover that 90,000? Like, are you worried that's what's
very
happened
good
now?
question. That's a very good question. I don't know. That's a good question because I do think that it's possible that one of those rookies wins the race. What I thought was interesting in the race or in the luncheon was I did ask Kyle Larson, who is the fastest rookie qualifier, and I asked Kyle Larson, okay, if it's lap 185 and it suddenly something happens, whether it be an on-track incident or something where they red flag it and it looks like there could be a substantial up to hour delay, but they are committed to finishing the race, will you, and if you are the leader, if you are 15 laps from leading the Indy 500 Kyle Larson, and a situation presents itself knowing that you have to do the Coca-Cola 600 that night and you are scheduled to do so, but if you are in the car with the understanding that there's going to be like an hour-long delay before you can finish the race, but you are leading and 15 laps from victory, will you relinquish the car to Tony Kanaan, who is scheduled to be his fill-in or his backup? And he gave me the answer. He said the answer. Jimmy, would you like to guess what, at that point, Kyle Larson decided he would do?
He's finishing to win the damn thing. That's my guess.
Okay.
Am I wrong?
I'll tell you on the other side.
Okay.
What else do we have lined up for today?
Lynn Dunn is going to join us next, actually.
Okay. I
Fresh
will
off
tell you
another close one for the Fever last night.
After we talk to Lynn Dunn, I will give you the answer on what Kyle Larson had to say. How's that?
I can't wait. I'm excited.
Okay. I'm live at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Jimmy back in studio. It is Query and Company. Lynn Dunn, Indiana Fever, joins us next here on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
When you ask people here, what's the one thing that makes diamonds...
a little bit of everywhere today, which I like. Jake Query at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Thank you again to the American Dairy Association of Indiana for having me MC, along with Derek, the fastest rookie luncheon. Kyle Larson getting the award. And he did answer the question to me, if it is 15 laps from the finish and something happens that would prohibit or delay your departure on time that you need to leave for the race in Charlotte, will you stay in the car to get the win, or will you relinquish your ride to Tony Kanaan? I will let you know what Kyle Larson said nearly without hesitation in just a couple of minutes. I mean, his answer was without hesitation, but I'm going to hesitate in telling you that because Lynn Dunn, who is the general manager of the Indiana Fever, joins us now on the always busy and shockingly unsponsored guest line. And Lynn, I'll begin with this, even though I know obviously she finished the game, and Caitlin Clark last night having the ankle injury. And I thought it was interesting afterwards. I'll give her credit when she said, hey, you know what, basketball players, we roll the ankles a lot. But where do things stand just in terms of that, of the overall concern beyond just the nicks and bruise of it last night?
Well, it's just another tough physical game in the WNBA. I give her a lot of credit for going out and coming back in and finishing the game strong. I think she'll be fine. Okay, so I want to get to this. And, you know, when you look at the record, and I think sometimes, and this is going to sound like I'm trying to carry water here, I'm not, but I want you to tell me if I'm being too optimistic. I think people will look at the record and say, well, the Fever are off to 0-4, and they've got a generational player, and they have Aaliyah Boston who's a great player. But when you really look at it, the scheduling really gave you no help here because even though I know you want to win games, don't get me wrong, but these are two really good teams that you've played that have made up for your 4 losses in New York and Connecticut, and I think you can see improvement with each of those from loss 1 to loss 2. But what say you? Well, you sound like a coach to me that knows what they're talking about. I'm telling you.
Well, thank you. That's twice you've told me that. My goodness.
Well, hey, you're exactly right. A week later, we're competing at a very high level with Connecticut, who was a Final Four team last year, and had a chance to win there at the end. And so I think you're right on. We're making progress. We're still young. I think we're the second youngest team in the league, and we've seen great progress in the last week. It's great to see Clark starting to handle the physicality of the game and the defenses that she's seeing. But, yeah, we're optimistic, just like you are.
Indiana Fever General Manager Lynn Dunn is our guest. Lynn, you've seen more about this game than either one of us, and there's not much, I would assume, that surprises you about what this game can offer. From our seat, you know, not having that level of experience, when you look at a player like Caitlin Clark, is there an amount that can be put, like so many people want to put an amount of, once she's played 10 games or 15 games or a whole season, then it slows down for her? Is there an amount of games for a player at the highest level the sport has to offer where things will slow down?
I think that's a great question, and it's hard to determine. You've got to remember she's played at a really, really high level at Iowa. You know, she was a marked woman there by every defense in the Big Ten. She's seen a lot of the traps that she's seeing now. The big difference is she's seeing traps from, 28, 29, 30-year-old women that are a little bit bigger and stronger. So I think she's pretty doing a pretty good job adapting as quick as she has. I mean, look at the difference in Game 1 and Game 2. She's figured out how to handle those traps. She's figured out how to throw her own punches herself. She's figured out how to get tackle. So I think she's making progress.
I don't want to undercut that. I just mean for her, and you look at other stars of the sport, Candace Parker, Lisa Leslie, like players of the last couple of generations, and on any side of the game, at some point for superstar caliber players, the line that's always used is, it's like chess for them. They're seeing the game 3-4 steps ahead. And that's not to downgrade, to your point, the level of competition and what she went through as a member of Iowa and their run to the national championship game this past year. But is there ever a point where, that is a determining point where she starts seeing this high-paced game, as you mentioned, with experienced veteran women that have been around for a long time, she's seeing at the level people think that she should see it at. Is there a point, or does it just vary from player to player?
It varies from player to player, but I think we're all seeing it. We've seen significant growth since the very first game. You know, she's figured out how to get loose from a player that's bigger, stronger, faster than her, that's Faith Gardner. You know, that same player last night couldn't control her that did a week ago. So that's the progress we're seeing. And I think you have to give her a lot of credit because she has enormous confidence in her ability. That's one of the things we loved about her when we watched her and scouted her at Iowa, that she has enormous confidence in her ability to handle whatever's thrown at her.
Lynn Dunn is our guest, general manager of the Indiana Fever. Then when you look at Caitlin Clark, you know, this has all happened obviously so quickly, right? I mean, it was only obviously 3 months ago she's playing college basketball. And I don't mean for her per se, but for the rest of your roster. The spotlight that has come with this, and you know, Aaliyah Boston is a great player with a great resume who's played in big games. Any player, if you're in the WNBA, you've played in big games and big moments. But light here in terms of the transcendence of it. How much did you kind of have to talk to your team about the newfound pressures and expectation that may come with that, the immediacy with which people wanted to see those results, and just wading through and navigating through something that is new really for everyone?
That's a really great question, and it's 24/7 from the get-go. The visibility, the team being under the microscope, the enormous amount of attention that we're getting from the media, sold-out arenas everywhere we play, ticket sales, you know, we're everywhere, not just at home but on the road. We're under a microscope with a spotlight on us. And so that is difficult for any team in any professional league, male or female, to handle. And so we're constantly talking about it, and we know that everybody has to adapt and adjust to it. That's why we've got, you know, more people helping us with security. We've got more people helping us with ticket sales. You know, we've just anteed up and upped the process here.
Has it exceeded where you thought it would be?
I thought it would be great like this, but it's even greater. It's exciting. I love the fact that we had 17,000 fans last night. We're an 0-3 team going into the game last night, and 17,000 fans on a Monday night are in Gainbridge Arena screaming and hollering and watching us play. And so I love that about what's happening for this Indiana Fever. It's an exciting time for us, but not near as exciting as it is for our Pacers, who are going to kick butt tonight in Boston.
I was going to ask you about that, Lynn, because concurrently, and you know, you give credit to the Pacers because they finally arrived at this moment, but it's been some time since there's been Fever and Pacers crossover, and over the next, I think it's the next week actually, from tonight, starting yesterday with Fever against Connecticut, all the way to next Tuesday, and you sandwich the 500 in there as well, you have either the 500, Pacers, or Fever basketball on for fans to watch. From your seat as the general manager of the Fever, but as an ambassador for the Fever and basketball in this state, and all that sports means for this state, how cool is that from your seat to see night in and night out this level of crossover around this time of year?
It's way cool. I don't know, in my lifetime, and I've been around a long time now, boys. I really have. You know that. I don't know if I've ever seen a week quite like this. You know what I'm saying? It's too bad the Colts aren't playing an exhibition game so we could mix them in, because this is a really, really exciting week for the city of Indianapolis, our sports, all the things that we love about this city. And then what a great opportunity for our Pacers. They've worked so hard. I give our guys, folks over there across the street, Kevin and Ted and Chad and Kelly, kudos to them for the team they've put together, the process they've gone through, watching that team grow and watching that team beat the Knicks. I mean, there's nothing like winning a game in Madison Square Garden. I can just tell you, there's nothing like it.
You know, when I was a kid, Lynn Dunn, and I played sports, they would put our first name on the back of our shirts, probably till like, I don't know, 3rd or 4th grade. But is there any chance that for the Fever that we can do that for like 2 weeks just so that we don't have somebody playing for Indiana professionally that says Boston on the back of their jersey? I mean, I love Aaliyah Boston. Absolutely love her, right? But like we got to change the name for like 2 weeks, right? I mean, can we do that?
Oh, well, let me tell you something. If we kick their ass, we'll just leave the name on there.
Then it doesn't matter, right? You can walk around as a Nick all you want around here. I mean, what are you going to do, right? Listen, it is the thing that's exciting about it, Lynn, and this is what I want, and I hope that people are aware of when thinking about the Fever, is the fact that when you look at this Pacer roster, I mean, the way it's come together quickly, but it wasn't built overnight. It was piece by piece and step by step, and then Siakam, and, there were a lot of moves that had to take place for this to all then gel together, and hopefully that's what we're seeing with the Fever, and people will allow and extend that same patience here to wade through this tough start and then see where everything eventually gels.
Absolutely. Success is never accidental. It never happens overnight. There's a process, there's a step, and there's a procedure. And, we're in year 3 of rebuilding this team, putting us in a situation where we can challenge for the playoffs, get in the playoffs, and then challenge for championships. And I again, kudos to the Pacers side, the process they've gone through, the great players and great people that they've brought into that franchise. And it's not surprising to me that they're in the conference finals.
It's an awesome time to be a Hoosier. Again, we mentioned it started yesterday with Fever and Sun, but every day until next Tuesday, then we'll see where the dust settles. There's some type of action, whether it's the 500, the Pacers, or, of course, the Indiana Fever next in action on Wednesday. Lynn, always appreciate catching up with you. Looking forward to continuing to seeing the growth of this team, and thanks again for making time for us.
Hey, thanks, guys, and y'all are pretty smart. I may need to talk to you about a little coaching.
I like that. Hey, we are always here for it. I'm here for it. I'm especially here for being called smart. Appreciate it, Lynn Dunn. All right, Jimmy, you want the answer to my Kyle Larson question?
I'll be honest with you, and I know that I'll occasionally stroke the ego and say it was a good tease, but it's been in the back of my mind on the edge of my seat this entire time. So, yes, I would like to know.
Okay.
Are you going to Regis Philbin me? Oh, you Regis me. Oh, come on,
That's
Jake.
Right. I'm going to be Chuck Woolry here. I'll let you know in 2 and 2 when we continue. 2 o'clock hour upcoming, by the way. More Pacers talk. You're listening to Query & Company on what is today, Tuesday?
It is.
Okay, that's a third 2. You're listening to it on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
What if the next time you painted your home was the last time you painted your home?
In Boston, that moves trackside and Beyond the Bricks beginning at 7 p.m. And then at 8 o'clock, we're Beyond the Bricks over to WIBC, our sister station 93.1. We will be inside the Bet 365 on Command Center, I should say, to bring you those two programs on 93 WIBC. All right. Kyle Larson earlier at the Fastest Rookie Luncheon, I asked the question flat out. Lap 185, you are in the lead. Something happens in the Indy 500 that is delaying the finish, and the finish is clearly going to be delayed well past the time that you would normally be leaving for the Coca-Cola 600. Do you stay in the car and take the win, or do you fulfill the commitments to make sure that you are there on time in Charlotte? I can tell you that there are drivers who have won the Indianapolis 500. Tommy Milton comes to mind. Peter DiPaolo comes to mind that had relief help. If you are wondering the drivers that have two faces on the Borg Warner in a year, that's because the relief driver ended up finishing the race for the driver that started. Joe Boyer did that for LL Corum. Maury Rose did that for Floyd Davis. Kyle Larson, almost without hesitation, said to me when I said flat out, would you get out of the car in that situation? And he said, I guess I would have to. Tony Kanaan would be ready there and in standby to get in the car, and that would be what we would have to do. Thus, that would mean if they were to win in that situation and Kanaan was to be the one to drive across the bricks after Kyle Larson had started the race, they would join the combo of LL Corum and Joe Boyer and Floyd Davis and Maury Rose as having both faces together for the same year on the Borg Warner Trophy.
Jay, can I ask
Scott
a
Agnes
question?
joins, yes, sir.
Can I ask a
Go
question
ahead.
of ignorance? And I know this is poor on me because we're up against it now
Okay.
that he's glaring at me. But is that in the modern age or of this century, is that a common practice still? Like, are there notable examples of that happening even without winning? Of a relief driver coming in?
Not without a previous situation. Tony, for example, Jacques Lazier once for Robbie Gordon got in the car and finished for him because Robbie Gordon had a NASCAR commitment and there was a rain delay and Jacques Lazier ended up getting in the car. But in terms of, unless there was a previously understood situation where a driver had to be out, it would be virtually unprecedented.
Okay.
So it is not common that a driver would have a relief driver in today's form. But that's what would be the situation for Kyle Larson if that situation presents itself. And I can only imagine what the crowd would do if Kanaan got in and finished the race and thus was to take the checkered flag. Scott Agnes joins us next.
For over 40 years, Chapman Heating Air Conditioning
Jake Query, Jimmy Cook. Eddie Garrison is the on-site engineer. I shouldn't say on-site because I'm on-site. He's back in studio. Jimmy Cook there as well. Jimmy, you've seen the 2016 Indianapolis 500 that Alexander Rossi won, of course, right?
Yes, I have.
Alexander Rossi, when he crossed the finish line in that race, was at like 178 miles an hour because he ran out of fuel going into turn number 3. And if you watch video of that, the way his car looks is about what I'm doing right now off turn number 4. Running on fumes, baby.
It's only
I'm
Tuesday.
here for it. I love every minute of it. Well, after today, it slows down significantly.
That's good.
And getting set for the 108th running of the 500 on Sunday. But tonight, big one, Pacers-Celtics, Game 1, Eastern Conference Finals. Joining us now from Fieldhouse Files to talk about that, Scott Agnes on the always busy and shockingly unsponsored guest line. And, Scott, begin with this. Would you ever have guessed, let's say even a year ago, that we would be saying Pacers Eastern Conference Finals Game 1? This, in your opinion, accelerates the original vision of timeline of the Pacers by how many seasons? 1 or 2? Or do you think they thought realistically it was now?
Well, I think it's probably 1 year ahead of where they are, and that's in large part due to being able to acquire Pascal Siakam when they did. Going into the season, as everyone said, the players all talked postseason, getting back to the playoffs. Tyrese coming off that USA saying, I'm tired of losing. He already got his contract. He already was named an All-Star. He was focused on team success going into the season, Jake. And then being able to acquire Pascal accelerated things a little bit. And then on top of that, they benefited from health concerns with the other teams, with the Bucks and with the Knicks. And that, in large part, is why they're here in the Eastern Conference Finals. But I think it's important for the front office and everyone on down the line to not jump ahead from where they were thinking as well, because I think while they've had success, I'm hesitant to think this is now the standard. This is what we should expect moving forward. There is still some growth away from all this. In large part, too, the stat I love to keep bringing up, Jake, is that they have done this, made this run without their top 3 draft picks in each of the last 3 years. Right? They were in the lottery the last 3 years. In Chris Duarte, they traded. Matherin's out with a season-ending injury. And Jarris Walker, a promising pick, is out of the rotation right now. So there is a lot of room for this team to still grow.
So what move or moves? You know, the easy answer here is obviously Halliburton and Siakam. I get that. But there are little auxiliary moves that they have made to get to this point. And one of those, quite frankly, was with Boston. And let's go to Aaron Nesmith. I think Boston was high on him and was open about the fact that they thought he could play, but he just simply was out of rotation in Boston. Was Nesmith, do you think that's factual, or do you think Indiana saw something that Boston did not, or is he simply the fact that Nesmith was in a rotation that obviously with the players they had, it just wasn't going to be there for him?
Yeah, I think it's that exactly. You're sitting behind great talent on the wing. And years ago, that also included even more of a backup. Gordon Hayward was part of it. That's in large part why he left, is because there wasn't enough basketballs to go around there. And so that is why Nesmith really didn't get on the floor. And what this front office has done a great job of doing is targeting players who are underutilized or misused. They come here and have success. That trade back several years ago was about moving Malcolm Brogdon and his contract in exchange for a first-round pick. Now, in doing so, they really got Nesmith and Daniel Tice, and then they paid off three players at the end of the roster who never saw the court. But Nesmith has been a huge success. He's been a huge surprise, too, I think, of how quickly he has come along. Now, there were high hopes, right? He was drafted high. They expected him to contribute, but I don't think at this level. And I think, honestly, if he could, if this team can consolidate a little bit and add to what they're doing, I really love the possibility of Nesmith becoming like your sixth man and doing so much in that role on a team that is contending for a championship. But he's just your Swiss Army knife, willing to do anything out there, playing hard. And I want to remind fans, the Pacers did a great job of signing him to a contract extension before the season, before this run. So he's under contracts for the next 3 seasons at a good value at $11 per.
Scott Agnes is our guest, covers the Pacers for Fieldhouse Files. Scott, I mentioned this at the start of the show. The in-season tournament, what was the biggest criticism of the in-season tournament? In my mind, it's single elimination. Are people really going to care about a trophy that's just an inaugural baby that's copying off of what they're doing over across the pond in soccer? And those were all fair knocks for critics, but we saw the enthusiasm for it, and we saw that maybe that can be a viable way to engage fans and players in the regular season. But the key takeaway on the Pacers side, even though it was single elimination, in that matchup against Boston in the quarterfinals, where the Pacers oust them on their way to a in-season tournament final appearance, Tyrese Halliburton, 26 points, 55% from the field, 45% from beyond the arc, 10 rebounds, 13 assists, no turnovers. We'll take the rebounds out of that stat line because I do care about that one, but I'm not expecting him to be a walking triple-double. For the Pacers to pull off the upset here and beat Boston in however many games, do you need a stat line from Tyrese Halliburton of somewhere in the neighborhood of 27 and 13 to like 2 turnovers? Is that about the mark that you need from him while being efficient offensively for them to have a chance?
I don't think so. He's never been that dominant scorer. I think it'd be great if he has 2 of those games in, say, a 6 or 7 game series. But I don't think it requires him to go off and have 30-point games on the regular. You need a couple of those big games from him, Jimmy. I think Pascal Siakam needs to give you a couple of those. I think Miles Turner probably could give you 1. And that really speaks to what this team's makeup is it's not so dominant on 1 or 2 players like, say, a Milwaukee is with Antetokounmpo or Lillard here. This is so much by committee. It's going to be so much more about getting stops, about not letting the Celtics get in a groove and get into things, and also minimizing Tatum and Brown out on the wing. Again, the Pacers don't have any excellent defenders, but I think what we've seen over the last couple of series in these big games with everything on the line, where they first got that experience, as you mentioned, in the in-season tournament, is that Nesmith and Nembhard and others are capable defenders and can really challenge guys in different ways. So I give them a lot of credit for that. But I do not think that Halliburton needs to go off for, say, 30-point efforts for the Pacers to have a chance at this series.
And I do want to clarify part of that, and that's why I never threw out the 30 number out there, because I do agree with you. Okay. I don't think he needs to have 30 a night. I do think that in the neighborhood of 20, 25 points would be a nice sweet spot for them. But that said, and we talked with, it was Evan Sidery earlier in the show, and I brought up that same point, and he brought up the same, I don't want to say counterpoint, but the same, well, look at the other stars the Pacers do have that you brought up, which is Pascal Siakam, Miles Turner, Ben Shepherd at times, whoever it is. There are pieces on this roster that are capable of scoring. That said, though, the stat line he puts together in the in-season tournament, especially that assist-to-turnover ratio, it goes without saying that, in theory, if you're having him thrive, be it as a scorer or as a passer, a similar stat line would be necessary for the betterment of scoring opportunities for the likes of, as you mentioned, Pascal Siakam and, say, Miles Turner.
Yeah, and with Tyrese in particular, I'm actually looking more towards assists. That's the number that's surprisingly gone down a little bit more. I mean, the fact that T.J. McConnell off the bench playing 10 fewer minutes has more assists than Tyrese, that's the number I'd like to see up, and certainly in double digits. I think if he can get that to 11 of 12 per game like he was for most of the season, that's a good indication of the Pacers' offense, how much it's flowing, how much the ball movement is going on out there, especially against a very tough Celtics team. Now, if he's minimized, if he's kept to 5 assists and then 15 points, you know it's going to be a win for the Celtics.
Scott Agnes, our guest from Fieldhouse Files. He is joining us on the guest line here. Jake Query along with Jimmy Cook. Game 1 tonight, Pacers and Celtics. Scott, part of me goes back and thinks to myself, okay, Tatum and Brown, if you let those two, and I know this is a kind of an easy way of thinking or a lazy way of thinking, but you think about it and you go, okay, if you let them get their combined 70, then where else, and maybe that may be inevitable. Those two, I think, are so dynamic. In particular, Tatum, when he gets going, is just so tough to stop. But to me, the real matchup is like Derek White, for example. I think the world of him. He just seems to hit timely shots for them. He's been a great acquisition for Brad Stevens in Boston. Who do they put there, and how do they defensively distribute what they need to do based on what we've seen throughout the course of the regular season, the way Indiana plays it?
Yeah, the matchups early on will be interesting. Derek White and Drew Holiday are the two that come to mind for me as well, Jake, because Brown and Tatum inevitably will get theirs. But Drew Holiday is a guy that the Pacers, especially Rick Carlisle, has immense respect for. And I remember a game where one of their stars was out, and I think Drew Holiday went for a triple-double when he was part of the Bucks. I think it was Giannis out, and Drew went for a triple-double against the Pacers, or a 46-point effort. He has always been underrated in his career and what he can contribute. He was just named to one of the all-defensive teams in the NBA this season. And so he outside of Tatum and Brown's the first guy I look at, followed by Derek White. And White's such a great defender as well that I think he might even he'll be the guy that probably gets a crack at Pascal Siakam, for example, and try to slow him down. Those two in particular on the defensive end. And then the Pacers, they're going to want to continue to play fast. One thing, Jake, that we've continued to hear from Tyrese Halliburton is trying to change the norm, trying to change the belief that the game in the postseason slows down and it's really methodical and it's more in the half court. He reemphasized that again after the Pacers closeout win about how they're trying to win differently, and the fact that they were in a playoff game against a stingy Knicks team. Now, given they were down about 5 players, but the Pacers still managed to score 130 points in a win. Early on in the season, you'd have to score 130, and you'd be concerned that you gave up 140 points. That's the big difference, I think, from the Pacers team over the last couple of months here, is now they're starting to lock in defensively, and you've seen more out of Nembhard and Shepard and even T.J. McConnell defensively.
Is your best hope against Boston, Scott, and more specifically their secondary pieces away from Brown and away from Tatum, hoping that the threes don't fall? I mean, I know we're going to debate constantly throughout this series if the Pacers are doing enough defensively, but it's been well documented how potent that the Celtics are from beyond the arc. Is it a matter of hoping that over the 7-game stretch, some of those key role players, some of those key secondary pieces have downward percentages, like in terms of not what their norm will be, but all it takes is 1 or 2 outliers in a series to change the course of the events that'll follow?
Yeah, the Celtics had a dominant regular season. I want to emphasize that, first of all. I think their net rating overall, as they had outscored opponents by an average of like 11 points per game. And at home, they were dominant as well, 37-4. But they did lose both game 2s in their first 2 series. So there is that opening. There is that thought. Even tonight, I guess, is they're coming off a week without playing. The Pacers have a lot of confidence going in. But in terms of the three-point shooting, you got to remember, too, the Pacers were very good at defending the three-point line. They were best in the league at fewest attempts and makes allowed per game. So that is a strength of theirs. But they're in the process of the last couple of months, Jimmy, we've seen several different players emerge and take on larger roles off the bench, like Sam Hauser, like Luke Kornet, if needed. I still like the Pacers bench, even though the Celtics have a lot more depth than we've seen in the first couple of rounds from the previous 2 opponents here. But a lot also hinges on Kristaps Porzingis and his availability. It seems like he won't be available for at least these first 2 games, again, with a calf strain like we've seen several players experience in this postseason. But his availability is also going to be interesting because he's only played in 4 of their 10 postseason games.
Scott Agnes is our guest. Scott, when you look at in trying to sustain what they were able to do offensively in Game 7, every once in a while, and the Pacers have been on the other end of this, you can kind of see it sometimes midway through a game where all of a sudden just like the roof caves in and you're like, man, this other team is just red hot. They're hitting everything, et cetera, et cetera. When you look at it that way, and you see what Indiana was able to do, did they do anything schematically differently? Did they come up with different looks or different sets that put them in position to shoot at such a high percentage that they can carry into Boston? Or was it strictly just one of those nights when everything went their way?
Yeah, I think it was more so the latter there. First of all, we saw Siakam start things up, and then Tyrese got going and scored, I think, 4 consecutive baskets. He used that courtside fan as motivation. And I thought, again, it was interesting post-game how he revealed that he's been texting Reggie Miller throughout the series because earlier in the year, he just acknowledged that they had been communicating some and they had open contact. And that really started over last offseason. a push from the Pacers front office and coaching staff to start developing a relationship there. But I think it was a matter of the team gaining momentum and then things just going your way. And the biggest thing that I took away from that Game 7, Jake, was the team's poise and how they handled themselves. And the moment was not too big, despite all they had talked about for the previous 2 days, was how, Game 7s are the greatest things in sports. They all had looked forward to those, all those different things. And yet it did not feel too big, much differently compared to how Game 1 in Milwaukee, right? That was utterly embarrassing, deer in headlights type of look. And so I thought their poise got them off to a great start. And then from there, it was just an avalanche going on downhill. And we know this team can score in bunches.
Scott Agnes is our guest. He covers the Pacers for Fieldhouse Files. Pacers-Celtics, Game 1 of the Eastern Conference Finals tonight at 8 o'clock. You can hear it on these very airwaves. Pregame show beginning at 7:30 here on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. Scott, am I overplaying, and being overexcited, I suppose, about the matchup that we haven't talked about yet that might be the best matchup that'll be featured on the floor? Of course, I'm talking about TJ McConnell versus Peyton Pritchard.
Of course, that's how we all saw it coming into this. That will actually be a fun and underrated one, but that will probably be the 5th or 6th storyline, I think, in this series.
Does that wind up being, like, to your point, though, I know there's a little bit of sarcasm there, but genuinely
Sure.
I am very excited about that because you've documented as well as anybody. They've had leads expand. They've gotten back into games. They've stayed in games all season, but especially in the postseason with TJ McConnell running with that second unit. And Peyton Pritchard is a natural adversary when they are sharing floor space, even though I know they variably put Peyton Pritchard occasionally with some of the starters later in games. I know that that's just a subject of their rotation, but in terms of second unit for the first time, that will be the matchup. How big of a difference maker is McConnell in that situation against Pritchard with his three-point shooting? Pritchard's, of course. And does that turn the tide like it did at times against New York and Milwaukee, the McConnell minutes?
I think it will to some degree, although Pritchard's a solid backup, basically plays similar minutes in terms of TJ, and I'll be curious how much more TJ's on their radar after what he did, because I don't think the Pacers win the last series without TJ, his bench minutes. I thought he really came in each time and leveled things and prevented those big runs by opposing teams, and I thought that was one of the big issues in the first couple of games when the Pacers lost those, is there were not enough TJ McConnell minutes when they really needed him out there. And I think that's one of the changes that they adapted later on and continuing on with TJ's success. But that matchup will definitely be fun, Jimmy, between those two and what they have to offer. Both teams just have such depth. Both teams are without one key player, otherwise healthy. That's what makes this matchup, I think, so intriguing here in the conference finals.
Scott, you grew up here, north side of Indy, like myself. You have been to how many Indianapolis 500s in your life?
I think I said last week like 15, 20, something like that.
Okay. Craziest thing you've ever seen at the Speedway?
I think it's probably on Carb Day, just the after effect, shall we say, around
It's
3 p.m.,
unbelievable.
5 p.m.
It's unreal. So, Scott, and listen, we might have mentioned this before. My apologies if I did. But I'm not even like I'm being like 70% serious here and 30% flippant. But I know, for example, we've made it a theme here on The Fan. But Andy Sweeney has on his rookie stripes, right? And I'll give him credit. I mean, he's reached out to me a couple times, and we chatted about like just the race itself. And Andy's trying to get up to speed, pardon the pun. But he still is holding thick to this theory that he's going to come out here on Carb Day and start with IPAs and have a couple IPAs and then move to light beer and move that for a little bit, and then like by 11 a.m. be drinking bourbon. And I don't think this is a hornet's nest, right? Like you can't go into that. I mean, like you're with me here, right? I mean, it's going to be hot. It's going to be humid. Like you're going to see people literally are going to be sweating oil and gravy, and like people are glazed like honey glazed hams walking around. The BAC for some people is going to be in the 0.3 area. Like you got to pace yourself, right? Am I wrong here? Am I just old now?
No, you're absolutely right. This reminds me of taking a first-time visitor to St. Elmo's and the cocktail sauce. No, this is just like ketchup, right? This is no big deal. They load it up, and then they're like, wow, I should have listened
It's
to
over,
you.
right.
And it's like,
It's over,
yeah,
right?
what
Yeah.
are you doing? There's no chance Andy will make it if that's the level in which he's going to go on Friday. I mean, those individuals I was hinting at, the people watching that I think is elite all week
unreal.
out there. You're going to see lack
Unreal.
of clothing. You're going to see sunburns, and you're going to see people uncomfortably passed out on the sidewalks.
You'll see under. You'll see at least 80 people with one shoe on. Right, just walking around with one shoe on. They have no idea, and like a sock half off. They have no idea where the other shoe is. I mean, it's just all of it, right? And then you got to pace yourself too, because you got the game Saturday night. Now, here's my other question for you, Scott. Shannon says to me as soon as the schedule comes out, "You're going to game 1 or to game 3," and I'm like, "No, that's fine." Then it comes out and it's 8:30 tip. Now that means minimum we're looking at like 11 p.m. departure from the field house, right? So that's doable, right?
Yep.
That's doable for me, right?
Yeah, you got this. You have to do it. Just take your nap earlier in the day or stock up on some sleep here during the week because you got to make that.
This is the second half century of your life, Jake. You have to live, okay? You need to live. That's all we're saying.
Squeeze the juice.
Exactly.
Hey, listen, I'm here for it. I'm telling you. Like, I wonder how many I mean, obviously there will be a lot, right, that will – but I'll get up. If I leave the field house at 11, like I'll get home at midnight, and then I don't usually sleep a lot the night before anyway, but I'll get home, and then I get up at 7:30 or 7:45. I'll be cool, right?
Oh, so you're sleeping in. Yeah.
Not
For
terrible.
race day, that's sleeping in. So I think you're
That
doing all
is.
right. Plus, Banks,
I mean, I'm
can you
lucky
bank
in
some
that
sleep
regard.
in the afternoon?
We got the parade, man. I do love the parade. I love the parade.
But that's over by like 1 o'clock, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So, yeah, you may be right. I love it. I love every minute of it, and I look forward to it for sure, and I'm thrilled to be a part of it in the most peripheral of fashions in all areas. Scott, we will be watching the coverage on Fieldhouse Files. Game 1 tonight, Pacers. What time is the exact tip tonight? Do we know?
Not probably 8:12, something like that.
Okay. That, again, trackside and Beyond the Bricks will be heard on our sister station, 93 WIBC. From the Bet365 Command Center for those two shows beginning at 7 o'clock and then 8 o'clock back-to-back because the Pacers radio coverage will be on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. Scott, we appreciate it. Talk to you soon.
All right, sounds good. Enjoy your week.
All right. Thank you. Scott, Agnes, you two joining us on the guest line. We'll come back. We will continue. I'll kind of recap the stuff that we were talking about earlier in terms of things that may be taking place on Sunday, but back deeper into that Pacers-Celtics conversation as we roll along. Query & Company here on a Tuesday, 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
Are you dealing with foot, knee, hip, or back pain?
Somebody just texted me and said, Jake, do not complain about having to go to the Pacer game. I'm not complaining at all. I said I am thrilled by it. I'm here for it. I love every minute of it, and I am totally fortunate to be able to go to both events, no question about it, and certainly hope that other people are able to enjoy everything that's going on here between the Fevers, the Fever, the Pacers, the Racers. It's the best. It's simply the best. Listen, that song there, Don't Stop Believin', that's what it's all about, right? You get a dream, you get a vision, you chase after it, you stay with it. Sometimes you need other people to help out. And when you get a dream, you get a goal, you get a purpose, you seek after it with baby steps and then bigger steps, and then before you know it, you're jogging towards them. It's what the Pacers have done to get to the Boston Celtics in the Eastern Conference Finals. But on this particular show, this Dog and Pony show that we do each and every day from 12 until 3, it started out as just the company, right? And then it's grown from there. We do what we can each and every day, and I am so appreciative of everybody that is part of the company. And then we still keep believing here. Eddie Garrison, if you could, please play the breaking news sounder. Thank you. This just in, the always busy and shockingly unsponsored guest line is no longer that.
Whoa.
It is no longer that. It is the always busy and soon to be announced with sponsor guest line. So to those who have reached out to me about that possibility, we appreciate it. To those in the sales department that worked in getting that sponsorship, we value that. And to those who would like to still find ways to be partnered with Aquarium Company, lest I remind you that we have Jimmy's always popular and shockingly unsponsored Plays of the Day, which is going to be upcoming. We, during the course of the NFL season, will have the always enjoyable and shockingly unsponsored 2-minute drill that we will do on each and every Friday. So the fun has just begun in terms of this cash cow that we're operating in the midday. But kidding aside, we are thankful that the guest line is, in fact, now with sponsor. Now, speaking of sponsors, tomorrow, and let me tell you something. I was driving here to go to the fastest rookie luncheon on my way, and I stopped on 16th Street to get myself a soda. And as I was standing there, a kid came up to me, little kid, 8, 9 years old. And I thought at first he was going to ask if I could buy him like a sucker at the gas station. And he said, oh, no. Can I get a number? And I said, I know, because kids love it. Kids absolutely love the numbers game. They love the numbers game. Valerie has come up with randomly assigned numbers. We have all 33 drivers in the field have been randomly assigned a number. And in the game that we do that is oh so fun, you call in, you give me your favorite number. Maybe your wedding anniversary is on the 3rd. Maybe you have 2 kids. Maybe you live in apartment number 20, whatever it might be. You give me your favorite number, 1 through 33. We will assign you the driver that has been randomly assigned to that number, and you can win one of 3 ways in our always surprisingly, wildly popular sponsored, and sponsored is the big thing here, numbers game. Now, 3 ways to win. Number 1, you get the winning driver of the 108th running of the Indy 500. No problem. Number 2, you get the driver that has moved the most spaces between starting position and finishing position. Now, what happens if there are 2 drivers in the field that both moved 14 spots? No problem. It goes by tiebreaker to the driver that starts the furthest back and had the most traffic to get through to get up to those 14 spots, although theoretically the same if you're going 14, but you get what I mean. The 3rd way to win is to get the driver that is the first out of the race. We used to call that the Dennis Firestone Award. Now, you ask, is this sponsored? Eddie Garrison, cue the music, because yes, in fact, it is.
Puccini's 7 side locations. Puccini's Pizza Pasta.com.
That's correct. Puccini's $100 gift card to the winner, $50 to second and third prize. And listen, that is worth its weight in gold. Jimmy, you see what we're doing here? We're just creating the content that people are clamoring for.
Everybody of all ages clamoring for this content, Jake. And in fact, you'd be proud of me while you were gone out of the gate today, albeit I hesitated the first time and I changed the wording a bit. I believe I went with the always exciting and shockingly unsponsored guest line for our first 2 guests.
It's no more.
I am happy to hear that it is no more, and I look forward to the big reveal.
The reality is, let's be real. The guest line, or most things on this show, are probably not overly exciting, but they were unsponsored, and they are no more. Now, I really do think that for whatever reason, I think that like we are at our best, and I'm at my best when I haven't slept in a while, so we're good to go here, right? During the home stretch.
And that's also why, to your point about being at your best when you haven't slept in a while, you should be going to both Pacers Game 3 and getting ready for the race.
Hey, I love
full
it.
scale. Hey, let's be clear. You weren't going to sleep anyway. Let's be honest. I mean,
No,
you're not going to be able to sleep anyway.
Night before the race, I don't sleep. That's for sure. And I really am being serious. I don't know why, with all the things that go on this month, and I love all of them. I mean, I love qualifying. I love the race itself. I think people know this. I mean, I love planning for the race. I love securing my ride for the race. I love getting the parking spot, everything about it. And if I was going in a non-working capacity, I would still love the tradition. When I was a kid, all the way up until like college years, after college, across the street from my parents' house, the Buchanans, a total tradition every Saturday night. I would walk into the Buchanan's house unannounced, just walk right in the front door, walk into their fridge and get 2 Mountain Dews, put them in my cooler. And they're like, oh, must be the race tomorrow. Yep, thanks for the Mountain Dews. Tradition, right? And people have their tradition of like 2 sandwiches and then a Little Debbie brownie on top and 3 beers, whatever it might be. I love all of it.
Some people have new traditions they're starting, like IPAs, and then switching to light beer, and then going into bourbon. I mean, it's whatever your tradition is. You have it established. You have to start somewhere. I mean, what are you going to do?
I've got a feeling that Andy Sweeney's drinking habits at the 500 are going to be like Scott Sharp's turn 1 when he was on the pole.
He's going to have
just a hunch.
Paparazzi following him and be so confused. Oh, you haven't heard? They've been talking about your drinking schedule all month.
I mean, look, man, I appreciate the bravado, but again, like I said, don't on your first time to Carnegie Hall, don't try to break out your violin. Just appreciate greatness. Now, my favorite day, though, is quite honestly, I do love the parade. Of all things, I love the parade because we just sit and soak it in, and I appreciate that Shannon enjoys it too. She did not grow up in Indianapolis, but she's lived here long enough now that it's home to her too. And because then, Jimmy, during the parade, that everything's about to happen. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's like Christmas Eve. Everything's about to happen. And just the build-up and the excitement for that is nothing shy of totally awesome. And then the race itself, and then to know that on Monday, and by the way, the morning show will be on Monday. The wake-up call with Kevin and Andy will be on the air Monday because I would anticipate that they will be getting the winner of the race on with them. And then our show and JMV will be off on Monday, but that night, of course, Game 4 between the Pacers and Celtics. So it is a pretty special time, no question.
And on top of that, Jake, I know we highlighted in our conversation with Fever General Manager Lynn Dunn, but it is really cool to know that every night up until next Tuesday, and then we'll see where the Pacers stand after that, there is either a Pacers basketball game, a Fever basketball game, or in the one-off instance, the 108th running of the Indianapolis 500. This is an awesome time.
Yeah, it's the best. Now we have to hope that the race gets in on Sunday, but we don't go there, right? We just do not go there. It's going to be good. Everything's going to be good. It's going to be fine. If there's going to be any precipitation, it's going to happen at like 7
You're at
o'clock
the track
night, right?
by yourself, but to be clear, I like that there's probably still silent assassins sneaking around IMS to where if you would have said that any louder than you did, you might have been in trouble.
Correct.
So I appreciate you.
No, you're right.
You staying
actually.
That way.
So I am at the Speedway, and for those that are curious why I'm here, because we have obviously our remote studio set up here at the Speedway for all the coverage that we do over the month. And I was helping out with the fastest rookie luncheon in the Chalet, so it was easier to walk over here and come up here. And kudos to our great engineering staff that have put this all together. But I can see out, just so you know, in the media center here, there was an Argentinian television network that was out here doing some stuff with Ricardo Juncos of Juncos Hollinger Racing. He has 2 cars in the field. Romain Grosjean and Agustin Canapino will be in the race. And then I can see down on the Yard of Bricks, the tour bus, which has a very familiar voice, is the voice telling you where you're going around it, by the way. The tour bus was just going out, and there were people on the bricks, and there is now, I believe, NBC setting up different things. So there is activity here, but it is obviously silent in
You didn't tell me.
comparison
You didn't
to the
tell
roar
me
of the
Eddie
weekend.
Garrison had a new side gig. I didn't know he was talking over the
That's right.
speaker of those tour buses. That's good for
That
you,
is
Eddie.
correct.
Nice job.
Thank you.
That is correct.
Thank you,
and if Eddie Garrison would like to go, they have triple size headsets that you can wear to be able to hear while you're going around on the tour bus. Jimmy, did you get some plays of the day that you have picked out?
I do have a couple for
I have
us.
so missed the head bashing. It was a nice 5-show stretch.
Well, I haven't been able to. You know what? I'll tell you. Just so you know, Eddie.
You could still see it from the speedway, but he was just being kind. He didn't want to say
That's
anything.
right. Derek Schultz did the 2-seater ride the other day and made the mistake of sending out a photo, and somebody had commented. The first comment was, and he said they didn't have helmets to fit him. So you were off the hook there for a little bit, Eddie. You took a back seat, pardon the pun, for just a little bit there, but don't worry. Back in the saddle tomorrow. So that was when tomorrow, when I'm back in, by the way, is when the numbers game will resume. Start actually. We will give out the numbers both tomorrow and on Thursday, right, to be able to get people their chance for that gift card to Pacini's. And who would not love that? Because you're talking about fabulous pizza, fabulous pasta, fabulous salads in multiple locations in Central Indiana. Back one final time. Jimmy's plays of the day next from IMS.
Puccini's Pizza, Pasta, Puccini's.
Plays of the day.
This is me, all right? I'm not a athlete. This is my way. This is how I win.
Today's plays of the day entirely focused on Game 1 of the Eastern Conference Finals between your Indiana Pacers and the Boston Celtics. Tip time, at least from certain sports books, says 8:10, though the listed time, 8 o'clock, Game 1 in TD Garden. We'll start first with player props. Give me over 27.5 points plus assists for Pacers star Tyrese Halliburton. On the other side of the ledger, I will take over 29.5 total points for Celtic star Jason Tatum. And lastly, there's 10 points to be scooped. We will scoop. Give me the 10 for the Indiana Pacers. They are 10-point underdogs. We will scoop the plus 10 for the Indiana Pacers on the road in Game 1 of the Eastern Conference Finals. Eddie, anything from you?
Just in case you're wondering the exact tip time, 8:13 tonight.
Oh, okay.
8:13.
But do you have a bet, though?
No.
All right, then. Those are your plays of the day.
813 is the area code in Missouri, isn't it? Can you look that up, Eddie? See if 813 is the area code in Kansas City, Missouri. Pretty sure that's right. Is this the kind of neuroticism that keeps me awake at night, you ask? Yes, it is.
Tampa, Florida.
But I think that's right. What's that?
Tampa, Florida, says Google.
It's Tampa?
Yep.
816, baby. What's 816?
I have to Google each individually. I didn't pull up a list. There you go. Kansas City, St. Joe's, Independence, Harrisonville, parts of West Central Missouri.
See, so I was wrong. My neuroticism still keeps me awake at night. By the way, Eddie, breaking news sounder if you could. When it comes to the best in tire and auto, CarX is your place. When it comes to connecting us to those that join this program, so too, because tomorrow we will begin our new relationship with the CarX guest line on Query and Company. So thank you to CarX, again, CarX.com, where you can not only find a location near you, but make sure that you are getting everything you need for your tire and auto needs. By the way, I just came up with the list here, and I'm curious. I want people to tell me either via Twitter or you can text me with this, okay? I'm going to read off a ton of names here real quick, but I just figured out this will be my 39th Indianapolis 500. It is the 18th 500 that I've been a part of the broadcast, which I am very honored to be able to say. But I went through and looked year by year of those 18 races at drivers that I think most people would most commonly say, you know, what happened to that driver, if you will. Which of these is the most obscure? I mean that as no disrespect to the drivers because it's an incredible accomplishment to run the Indy 500. But which of these most makes people, when they hear the name, go, wait a minute, I totally had forgotten that name. I'll read them off quickly, but then you can either text me at 317-523-9288. That's 317-523-9288. Or you can send me a tweet at Jake Query. Here we go. Or at the show Twitter, which Eddie is?
At Query_Company.
Okay, this list right here. Kosuke Matsura, Phil Giebler, Enrique Bernaldi, Jamie Camara, Nelson Felipe, Robert Dornbos, Mario Romancini, Bertrand Baguette, Michel Jourdain Jr., Wade Cunningham, Tristan Vautier, Jack Hawksworth, Mateus Laced, Zachary Clayman DeMello, Jordan King, Ben Hanley, Oliver Askew, R.C. Enerson, or Benjamin Peterson.
Can you do that again,
Which of those
slow it down?
Mm-hmm. Here we go. Kosuke Matsura, Phil Giebler, Enrique Bernaldi, Jamie Camara, Nelson Felipe, Robert Dornbos, Mario Romancini, Bertrand Baguette, Michel Jourdain Jr., Wade Cunningham, Tristan Vautier, Jack Hawksworth, Mateus Laced, Zachary Clayman DeMello, Jordan King, Ben Hanley, Oliver Askew, R.C. Enerson, Benjamin Peterson. Some of those are very accomplished race car drivers. They came here and they did once or twice, and that was it. There's another name that I had on the list, but he's in prison for some very questionable things, and so I left him off the list. But there you go. There's the list. Who would be your nominee there, Eddie, on that list? Are you going to say all?
Yeah. Yeah.
Bertrand Baguette was leading the race, man, and came in. He ran out of fuel at the very end, and they brought him in like at the very, very end there. Wade Cunningham's a realtor in Indianapolis. Okay, that's cool. He was from he's from New Zealand. I knew that much. Wade Cunningham. Bertrand Baguette, though, he was a good driver. Belgian Bertrand Baguette. Almost won the race for Rahal Letterman Landing and Racing, and then at the last second had to come in and pit, and I think that's when J.R. Hildebrand took the lead in 2011. I think that I'm correct in that. By the way, Eddie, I regret to tell you that I completely forgot to stop the clock on when we're done. So you just let me know when we have a minute left, right? But Jimmy, were you surprised by the 10-point spread? I was. That seems high to me.
No, it does seem high with the impact of how the Pacers played against New York and against Milwaukee. But you look at most of the spreads the Celtics have been a part of because of just how great and perceived they've been. It's been about double digits. If the Pacers are able to surprise some folks, Evan Sidery, we had him earlier today, Jake, he said he thinks the Pacers can steal it tonight and win game one and take home court right out of the gate. I think you see a shift there. It's not fully too rich, though, for me, even though I am scooping it. It's not fully too rich because of how dominant the Celtics have been, not just in these playoffs with gentlemen sweeps after gentlemen sweeps, but over the totality of the regular season.
They're obviously outstanding, Boston. But Pacers are going to win 6. Right?
Okay.
I'm telling you.
I like that.
Why not? Look, I mean, why not, right? Why not Indiana? Why not Indiana?
Why
right?
not us?
Anything in life, and it's trademark, so don't try doing anything with it. Anything in life, you just say to yourself, why not Indiana? Where would you like to live when you retire? Why not Indiana? Who's going to win the Eastern Conference? Why not Indiana? Tomorrow at noon, numbers game. We get them underway, we give them away, and we recap game 1. Thanks for listening to Query & Company.
The Ride with JMV.
I know everybody wants me to take the high road. You know what? I'm going to take the low road. I'll be there before you. Nobody understands what you, the local fan, had to endure with the Colts and the Pacers the past 10 years. Who cares about